I am Colby Sumner, and this is America, Fog of War.
Pride of our nation, this day have set upon a mighty endeavor, the struggle to preserve our republic. Men's souls will be shaken with the violences of
The cost of freedom is always high, but Americans have always paid it. And one path we shall never choose, and that is the path of surrender.
I can hear you. I can hear you. The rest of the world hears you. And the people who knock these buildings down will hear all of it.
We're told that on his body was found a diary. Under the heading, My Pledge, he had written these words: America must win this war. Therefore, I will work, I will save, I will sacrifice, I will endure.
Hey everyone, thanks for joining us again for another episode of Hippocket History. I am Colby Sumner, and as always, I'm joined by my co-host Brett Thomas. How you doing, buddy?
Doing great. How's it going?
Oh man, it's a good day. We got the studio is set up. It's ready for a good take of Hippocket
It's a
History.
nice chill vibe in here right now.
You know, I'm feeling pretty good too, because we're also getting ready to talk about, the baddest of the bad when it comes to leaders or generals from this war. And that's
Right.
none other than Ulysses S. Grant, man. I
Right.
mean, the guy is unparalleled. He is an unstoppable force. When he makes his mind up on something, it's going to happen. It might take a minute, but it's going to happen.
He has a very dominant presence and a dominant force.
Right. And not only that, man, but he likes to fight. He's more reserved than like a Jackson would be. He doesn't get all animated and stuff in combat. On the contrary, most of the things I've read, he stays really freaking calm, which is, honestly, that's a great trait to have, man. You know, to be able to stay calm and think clearly, and you don't interject any false emotion into the situation that could really hurt you. You know, if you are running around all excited, that could be perceived as nerves. And if your guys think you're nervous, they're gonna start getting nervous. So let me set the scene for everybody before we get started. Today we're gonna be talking about Grant's capture of Fort Henry and Fort Donelson. But to kind of set up the situation, you know, we've had a few battles have happened by this point. We've had First Manassas over in the Eastern Theater of Operations over in Virginia, which was a Union defeat. We've also had Wilson's Creek, which ended up being a Union loss as well. So things aren't looking too great for the Union Army right now, or for the Lincoln administration. We're about a year into, not quite a year into this thing, and we're not doing too good on the Union side of things.
Got to make some new plans.
Right. You got to get some new ideas, some new strategies in there. So to set up the scene, you're going to be dealing in the Western Theater today, and the first thing you got to realize is there's going to be a change of command for one of the major departments out there in the Western Theater, and that's the Department of the Missouri. General Fremont, who had been out there pretty much since the start of the war, he was there for the whole Wilson's Creek catastrophe and all that mess. He will be replaced by General Halleck. General Halleck will actually hold the job for a while. He's a political general. He's got connections in Washington, D.C. He's not one of these guys that, graduated from West Point and spent a career in the military. He got his appointment because of his political position. And, obviously it's sometimes worked out for the best in the Civil War, but for the most part, those are the officers that Lincoln had to find a way to get rid of, or replace.
Still true to this day, somewhat.
Right. Yeah, but definitely not to the same level, right? At least the guys coming through now that have political connections, at least they got to go through the training and stuff.
Yeah, they still got to go through, yeah.
Guys like Halleck are just putting on a uniform and picking up the job. You also, so you've got him taking over the Department of Missouri, and that's about 70 to 80,000 men, and he's going to be headquartered out of St. Louis, Missouri. You're also going to have another Union force in the area, which is separated from Halleck's area of operations by the Tennessee River, and that's going to be General Buell. Now, General Don Carlos Buell is going to be in charge of the Army of the Ohio, and that has roughly 50,000 men. His HQ located at Louisville. Now, Union strategy is shifting in this period. Like we said before, they've been in the war for almost a year at this point, and things are not looking too good for them. So they're going to shift their focus. Instead of pitched battles against, major military organizations or forces, they're going to try to take control of key rivers and waterways in the Western Theater. Now, this is important for a few reasons. Obviously, controlling a river, you can resupply the men that are down there with either ammunition, food, or more men for reinforcements. You have quicker transportation up and down into different various parts of the theater. And a big component of that, too, is it takes away the ability of the Confederate military to be able to do this, do all those things the same, right? So you gain an advantage while the enemy loses an advantage. And supply routes and transportation, quick transportation avenues are up there at the top of the list of important things to try to secure.
Yeah, there's a lot that goes in behind the scenes, behind the infantry, behind the front lines.
Right. Well, you got to keep that
movement.
army fed to be able to keep them fighting, and you got to keep them armed and with munitions and all kind of stuff. So yes, it's very important what's going on. That being said, just to kind of let everybody know what those key waterways are, right there at the northwestern portion of Tennessee, where it meets Kentucky and Illinois. All these states kind of meet up where a bunch of rivers converge on each other. And that's going to be the Tennessee River, the Ohio River, and the Cumberland River, with the end goal of securing the Mississippi River. The Mississippi River is part of General Winfield Scott's Anaconda Plan, right? That's where he decides he wants to cut the Confederacy in half in his Anaconda Plan and kind of squeeze them to death without any external supplies making their way in to equip this Confederate army. Now, to accomplish this, the Union would conduct joint land and river campaigns as they progressed south down these rivers, taking various forts and strong positions on those waterways, and then manning those so they can maintain those waterways, using them for their efforts. I think that's kind of cool. Makes me feel like Grant. I know Grant is an Army guy. He graduated from West Point and spent his career in the Army, but he makes me feel like he's a little bit of a Marine too, because that's definitely a Marine job, right?
That's
Working
right.
in tandem with amphibious forces. If they have this plan to do some kind of joint land-river operation, they're going to need the right naval equipment to be able to do that with. So the Secretary of the Navy, Gideon Welles, is going to send a few naval officers out west, and their sole purpose is to stand up a gunboat flotilla. Now, this gunboat flotilla they stand up will become known later as the Brown Water Navy, which I think that's kind of cool.
That
But
is
that's
cool.
how they distinguish, the blue water Navy, the open ocean, open seas Navy, the Navy of sail and all that stuff, versus these river guys, these riverine sailors. Essentially, they're the Brown Water Navy.
That's very interesting.
Yeah, I thought that was kind of a cool little nickname, but they still need specific ships. Now, around this time, you're going to have a lot of developments in the ironclad area of naval engineering, really above and beyond what they had been in previous years. They're going to basically overnight render these old ships made of wood and stuff. They're going to render them pretty much useless. So the War Department commissions a St. Louis engineer by the name of James B. Eads. I don't know if that's Eads or Eads. I don't know the right way to say that, so bear with me there. But his sole purpose with this commission that he receives from the War Department is to construct 7 ironclad boats. This is going to be city-class ironclads. Oftentimes ships will have a class designation. The Virginia class, the Baltimore class. They do different things. They're different sizes. In this case, the ships will be named after cities. That's one way you can kind of determine that it's a city class. But these are going to be river ironclad gunboats, and they're going to look a lot like what used to be the USS Merrimack, but becomes the CSS Virginia. It's the Confederate ironclad from the Battle of Hampton Roads that we're going to talk about at some point.
It really is incredible, the advancements during wartime. Because like you said,
It's
overnight,
amazing.
they're just, hey, we're going to make these way bigger and better.
For all the negative things you can point out from warfare, and it's overwhelmingly negative, all the death and suffering that comes. There's also so much progression and so much experience and knowledge gained in so many facets of life that improve the quality of the lives of the people that will be around to live after the war. It's if you get far enough away from it, in a historical standpoint, you could almost make the argument that the war is a good thing, right? Because of all the things it brings up, whether it's medical advances, or if it's
Flight, shipping.
whatever the case is, right? Like transportation, all these things just get touched, and they progress at an astronomical pace. So these gunboats, like I said, are going to look like the CSS Virginia. So it's going to have the sloped sides. It's going to have cannons on either side, and the portion of it that's above the water is going to be made of iron. Very sturdy and protective against returning artillery fire.
That there will be.
Now, the problem with this is constructing, outfitting, and manning all these gunboats, these new 7 gunboats, it's going to take a lot of time.
Yes, it does.
And so, because we were watching a video about this online the other day, you and I, and they were even talking about, to recruit these guys, they were going around to all the infantry garrisons and infantry regiments there in the area and saying, hey, you want to get out of marching? You want to get out of sleeping in the rain and the snow? You can come do this. You'll be under a roof every night. You won't have to march anymore. It'll be an easier time in the military. I have to tell you that if they approach somebody early on in their military career, just at the right time, that would be such an easy sell, I feel like.
Oh, yeah.
If
you're already doing it.
Yeah. So what results from that, man?
Because it takes so long, this campaign, this plan, what they're going to kick off, they're receiving a lot of pressure from President Lincoln, and he's looking to the Western theater because not being as successful in the Eastern theater, he wants to get this going. So Brigadier General Grant, he's going to propose a strategy, and he's going to be the one that comes up with the idea, which is we're going to travel south into the Confederate States by the waterways. So Grant, along with the U.S. Navy flag officer Andrew Foote.
Interesting note on that.
What's that?
Andrew Foote was named a flag officer so that he would have to remain in, because this is a new thing, right? Initially in the war, people from the Department of the Navy and places of command were under the impression that rivers were the Army's responsibility. Even though it's water, it was inland. It was the Army's deal to deal with that, right?
Okay.
Joint operations are not a thing at this point. Actually, Eads, the same guy that builds these city-class ironclads, is also going to build the wood-clad gunboats that will also be a part of this gun flotilla that's getting organized and eventually make assaults on Fort Henry and Fort Donelson.
Okay.
So he makes those, almost right after Fort Sumter. He writes Gideon Wells. He says, hey, man, I can re-outfit these ships, these steamboats, and make them really useful for river operations, right? So Gideon Wells is like, all right, yeah, go for it, dude, do it. And he does it successfully. Well, he gives them over to the Department of the Navy, who then turns around and hands them over to the Army. Like, these are yours. These aren't ours. You guys do with this what you want. And so, as this develops, right, and they decide, okay, a joint operation is what is needed here. We need Navy guys here for this. They send Foote over, well, to make sure that Foote was still held responsible for recruiting men to fill these ships, arming the ships with cannon, supplying and outfitting the ships and getting them all prepared, all still fell under his responsibility. He was made a flag officer, which is about the equivalent of a major general, from my understanding. Meaning that even at the time, he outranks Grant. You know what I mean? Now, Grant's in charge of the operation. I think he gets final say on everything. But as far as conducting his men and making sure his men are fed and equipped and all that stuff, that's why Foote gets the rank of a flag officer when he gets sent out west. I thought that was kind of an interesting little tidbit.
That really is an interesting tidbit there, because I didn't know what a flag officer was.
Right. Well, we have a decent understanding of naval culture and how all that stuff works, but not that much,
Yeah, not that much, and now they're working together. So they're mainly going to focus on the Tennessee and the Cumberland rivers in order to move their ships throughout Tennessee and just really try to split the Confederacy completely in half.
Right.
And Fort Henry is going to be the first target along the Tennessee River that they're going to attempt.
All right, well, here we go, man. That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Let's get Fort Henry.
Yes, let's get it. February 2nd, 1862. Grant was approaching with 9 transport boats and over 15,000 troops. In defense of the southern border was General Albert Sidney Johnston and about 70,000 Confederate troops. But they're not all down on the river there. They're spread out throughout Kentucky, Tennessee, and all over the place, really. So Fort Henry actually turns out to be the weakest place in the Confederate lines.
Okay, yeah, it makes sense, right? Like knowing where it lies, and we're gonna explain that as best we can with just words here in a second. But I do recommend everybody get online and kind of look at where the fort is located. It's in a very vulnerable spot. It's flooded, I'm pretty sure, most of the time, because this, they've been getting, during the winter, they've been getting a lot of rain and all that kind of stuff, and the water levels are much higher. And it's a weak position, man. It's a weak position. And I feel like it's also the closest one to Northern Territory, right? Like, it's right on the border.
Oh, it's not far down. As soon as they cross the river, they're not far.
So I don't know if Grant can ultimately be considered like a genius strategist. I mean, he's a phenomenal commander and he's one of the best generals our country's ever had. But as far as like tricky strategy, right? Like deceiving the enemy and all that stuff. That's not really Grant's deal. I mean, he is a guy that swears by the basics. You know what I mean? And if you got the basics down, you're good. Just have them really hammered down, you know? So, I mean, that's an obvious approach, right? You want to hit them where they're weakest. That's pretty self-explanatory. But where Grant stands apart from everybody else is he executes, right? He finds that easy thing to do, and then when he decides he wants to do that, he will just find a way to do that.
And he's got a Navy now.
He does.
That's
and listen,
super cool.
This is complicated, too. Now, I just made the point that I don't know if he's this amazing strategist, but he is the first guy to conduct a joint operation with naval forces on a river, right? Like, this is all fairly new kinds of fighting for Grant and the rest of the U.S. military at this time.